some level, if the role is not working properly, if the roles are not cooperating with each other, you can always resort to power. And power is almost like the last stance that males use in getting their point across in a relationship, in ruling the relationship, in controlling the relationship. And so what we have now is a society where even the roles of the children are evolving. And so we're in a society now where roles are no longer clearly defined. And we have a whole lot of people that are trying to clearly define what role do I play in this family? What is my role? And again, I'll go back to leadership. Leadership then now helps a person clearly define, okay, in our society, you cannot just assume a person knows their role. Here in our context, what leadership would do is say, here is your role, and it's an agreeable role. This is a role that you will play. This is a role that I will play. And in that mutual agreement, we'll be able to have a beneficial relationship. If not, somebody is going to be confused as to who should do what, and then the foundational problem is going to arise again, and that's power.
Trace Fleming Smith.
I think you're right that about gender stereotypes and about stereotypes in general, that we absolutely need to be having conversations about this, and we need to be exploring what these gender stereotypes are, because when you're talking about, well, these are the only expectations for women and these are the only expectations for men, that boxes us in and it really limits us. And it's time to have these conversations of what you said about evolving, about our new roles and that's important. I think we need to see more involved conversations about that, but also conversations about the evolution of masculinity and what that means, and the new man and what that means.
Yes, sir. Dr. Tim Barnett.
Well, I'm by far the oldest person in this room, and
we don't know that now.
I can say with no doubt in my mind that in our social circle, for my wife and I, no doubt at least 3 out of 4 married women, have the power in their families. And I think as families, as the people age and as women are professionally employed, that's often the case. My wife has the trump card. There's just no doubt about it. So I think that, these are complex and evolving times. And, in some ways, in some families, there may be more violence as a result of confusion over roles. Like the pastor has said here, in 1/3 of all families in the United States now, the women are earning more than men. That may be a very good thing. But it's probably creating some confusion in families too, and they have to adjust.
Let me switch gears here for a minute. Let me switch gears here for just a minute, because we just only have about 11 minutes left in the broadcast. Crime is a result to geographical location. Is crime different in the suburbs than it is in urban areas? A perfect example, there are shootings that do happen in which that do happen in public areas, and it's usually not always some type of mass killing. For instance, there was a shooting that occurred just this past summer at the Victory for the World Church in DeKalb County, Georgia. This is right outside of Atlanta, in which the funeral for a 19-year-old man by the name of Ryan Geider. Well, a gunfight broke out between one of his friends and another individual, and the suspect who was believed to have killed this 19-year-old whose funeral this shooting occurred was also believed to have been seen at, quote unquote, seen at this church, but there is no proof that he was there. So this was an instance in which someone who was believed to have killed this young man, of which this funeral took place, that he was at the church of this funeral, and apparently he got into a confrontation with one of the victim's friends. A shootout began and 2 people ended up dead. do these things happen in the suburbs? And I guess that's the question that we can say. And the level of violence that occurs in suburban areas and the level of violence that occurs in urban areas. Gang violence in suburban areas. Let me ask you this, Dr. Aaron Ryder. Do you feel that exists? Does gang violence occur in the suburbs, and can a mass shooting occur in an urban neighborhood? Because it seems that we see that these mass shootings happen in small towns where crime is very small. Where crime is it's not heard of. Even in the situation of the Newtown, Connecticut, there were reports that Newtown had not had a murder in almost 10 years. In Littleton, Colorado, very small, where the Columbine High School massacre occurred. Very small, close-knit community, very little crime. In the community where the West Side 1998 West Side shooting incident, Jonesboro, Arkansas, very small, close-knit community, not much going on. Why is it that these small towns are hit with these big massacres that we all hear about, and that these continuous shootings and these continuous killings and these continuous murders of people, such as what's going on in Chicago right now? Chicago was the murder capital of the world last year with 503 murders. That means that one person was killed in the city of Chicago every single day, plus over 100 extra. Every single day of the year in Chicago for 365 days, somebody was being killed. Why is it that we don't hear about those types of incidences, these types of incidents happening in urban areas, but we hear about them happening in low crime areas?
I think it's the way we frame things. And so to take a step back, and this is pretty complex to try to think about this. In inner cities, the media frames it as this is normalized violence. It's inherent to these communities. A lot of times there's a lack of resources, low social capital. Communities are vulnerable because of high unemployment rates, racism, poverty, all these types of conditions. And so if, let's say, for example, men are trying to get status and honor through masculinity, then sometimes violence becomes their illegitimate opportunity because there's no legitimate opportunities. If we look at suburban types of crime, a lot of times the way we frame it is that they don't have crime, or that these are the safe communities because they're gated and they have resources and so forth. When we talk about these rampage shootings, we just say it's this isolated individual that did it. It's not part of our community. It's not part of our culture. We don't say boys are engaging in this violence. We're not saying that, why are these young boys engaging in violence in this way? We just say it's this person. We don't look at race or gender at that point. Yet these boys are, male and white at this kind of categorization. Let me take it to armed conflict. When there was the armed conflict in Bosnia-Herzegovina, the argument was that we had to have a lot of media attention because European civilization was falling apart because of this conflict, because these are the communities that are supposed to be engaged in types of armed conflict. But the various wars in parts of Africa, people normalized that and said Africans are always fighting, or this is inherent to their culture when it wasn't. So I think sometimes the way we frame things says that this is normalized and this is not, and that's problematic. And it relates back down to privilege and power, relates to gender, race, class, all of those types of things. And I think sometimes we look at the micro level and just say this is an individual thing or this is community thing. We could look at it structurally and try to understand it in those terms.
I mean, she hit the nail on the head. I mean, it's happening everywhere. It's in urban and suburban, but it's what the media is showing. The media is like kind of raising kids right now. You're talking about violence, and then certainly Dr. Barnett said it earlier. It's not the total defining thing, but it's a big factor in the violence, because kids now see 500 acts of violence in one day. In a few hours, you have seen 500 acts of violence. So it has kind of desensitized people. And not only acts of violence, they're seeing over 500 images of sex. So, it goes back to what everybody's been saying. This is what they're seeing. This is what's raising them. This is they're normal now. This is what's normalizing them. So they're seeing these things. And so we have to, as far as finding a solution, Dr. Barnett hit on this earlier too, we have to bring it back to a spiritual or religious or back to the Word of God base. To get some more images other than the wrongful images that they're seeing, and that's normalizing them.
Pastor, I guess in 60 seconds, please, Pastor Fred Smith.
Okay, and then I think also in our society, what we have to look at is that we're trading off. We have more information. but we're lacking less of the right knowledge. We have a more accessibility, but we have less access to the right things. So it's almost like we're getting bigger, but we're not getting better. We're getting more notoriety, but we're not getting seen for doing the right things. So there's a trade-off that's going in our society, and I guess my closing remarks would be for each one of us that's been said tonight is to remember our level of leadership and maximize it.
And let's just say in 30 to 45 seconds for all of you, in 30 seconds, what do you think can be done to diminish acts of violence, whether it be sexual, racial, shooting, terroristic, gang, whatever, in whatever realm you put it in? What are the solutions? Because at the end of this program, I want to be able to leave people with solutions and not just fluff. In 30 seconds, what do you believe can be done to diminish acts of violence to where hopefully the next bad thing that happens to anyone on any level will not happen again?
I think we got to take a real hard, long look at ourselves. We got to stop confusing dominance with masculinity, and we have to stop being selfish and think about everybody else. And we need to just think.
I think our nation needs to get back to a biblical foundation, and we must learn to forgive others.
Live our values. Not only find our values, but begin to live them.
Dr. Tim Barnett.
I'd like to recommend 2 books. Craig Whitney, Living with Guns, A Liberal's Case for the Second Amendment, and John Lott Jr., More Guns, Less Crime, Understanding Crime and Gun Control Laws. That's the University of Chicago Press, probably the best research that's presently available.
Dr. Aaron Ryder.
I think that we need to take part in some form of ethical action and promote the interconnection amongst individuals and communities, and practice forms of ethical behavior rather than reproducing these types of isms, sexism, racism, classism, and do this through ethical action. That's actually from Leila Fernandez in her book, A Spiritualized Activism.
Trace Fleming Smith.
I think one of the ways too, speaking of activism, is to participate in events like the 1 Billion Rising, which is happening all over the world on February 14th. Over 183 different countries are participating in the 1 Billion Rising, because we know that 1 out of every 3 women will be physically or sexually assaulted across the world, and because of that, that's 1 billion people. I would really recommend people taking a look at the website. It's www.1billion.rising.org. We're having local events here in Anniston and in Jacksonville, and we would urge you to participate on February 14th.
Yes, please. Mr. Sean Crease, 15 seconds, please.
I think we all need to admit that as a society that there are problems in all these aspects, and I think that we also need to accept responsibility that it's up to us to fix it. We need to stop wondering when somebody's going to step up and when that somebody is going to fix it. We are that somebody, and so we need to take it upon ourselves to take that action. And also I think we need to stop cutting funding for different type of social supports, community supports, and mental health services.
Well, I thank you all so